Welcome to the Real Crime Zone, where we explore the most chilling and puzzling crimes. Today we're diving into a case that's as tragic as it is complex. The story of Neil Entwistle. Originally from Nottinghamshire, England, Neil was an electronic engineer with a promising career. He was married to Rachel, his college sweetheart, and together they had a beautiful 9-month-old daughter, Lillian. On the outside, their life looked perfect, a happy family in a new home. But behind closed doors, things were far from picture perfect. On January 22, 2006, the bodies of 27-year-old Rachel and their 9-month-old daughter Lillian were discovered in the master bedroom of their rented home, just 10 days after they had moved in. What could drive someone to destroy their own family? Was this the act of a loved one or a stranger? Join us as we peel back the layers of this disturbing case and uncover the truth behind the lies and secrets that led to this horrifying tragedy. This is the twisted tale of deceit, debt, and betrayal that ended in murder. Neil Entwistle was born on September 18, 1978 in England. Growing up in a working-class family, his father worked in a mine and was a local politician. His mother managed the household and also worked part-time as a school cook. Despite their modest means, Neil excelled academically and was the first in his family to attend university. He was determined to rise above his background and build a successful future. Neil studied electronic engineering combined with business management at the University of York. It was there in 1999 that he met Rachel. Rachel was an American exchange student with a different background from Neil's. Her father had passed away when she was young, and her mother had remarried, blending their family. As a teenager, Rachel was a track and field star, a talented swimmer, and had aspirations of attending law school. However, she decided to study English literature and came to York for an exchange program. Neil and Rachel were drawn together by their mutual love for sports. They joined the university's rowing team, where Rachel, despite being a woman on a men's team, was welcomed because of her skill and enthusiasm. Neil, more reserved, found Rachel's energy refreshing. Their differences only seemed to strengthen their bond, and soon they were a couple. Neil was open about his serious intentions, often introducing Rachel as the one he wanted to spend his life with. Rachel felt the same way, appreciating Neil's politeness and affection. When Rachel's exchange program ended in the summer of 2000, she returned to America, and the distance made her realize how much she missed Neil. She told her friends she had found the love of her life and planned to return to him. The relationship was strong enough to withstand the separation, and by 2001, Rachel was back in the UK. They rented an apartment in Birmingham, where Rachel started teaching English and Neil began working in a significant role related to the British Army's research and development. In August 2003, Neil and Rachel married in a fairy tale ceremony. They spent their honeymoon traveling around the Mediterranean. Both were happy and fulfilled, both personally and professionally. They decided to start a family, and just a year after their wedding, Rachel became pregnant. On April 9, 2005, their daughter Lillian was born. Neil even set up a website to share photos of their family with relatives in America. Their website showcased their joy, presenting a seemingly perfect family. Rachel adapted well to life in England. She built strong connections with her students and friends. Neil, however, struggled with insecurities about his background and felt that his working-class roots held him back in his career. He believed his accent made it clear he came from a working-class family, limiting his opportunities. To escape these feelings, Neil suggested they move to the United States, which Rachel supported. Missing her family and friends, Rachel saw this move as a chance to be closer to them and raise Lillian in her home country. Neil arranged to work remotely, maintaining his $10,000 monthly salary, and in September 2005, they moved to the United States. They initially stayed with Rachel's mother and stepfather. The grandparents were thrilled to have Lillian around and often spoiled her. Rachel's stepfather, Joe, a tall, burly man with a passion for gun collecting, tried to bond with Neil through his hobby. He showed Neil antique firearms and invited him to join in recreational shooting, which Neil was eager to do. Neil tried finding a job in their new location but had no luck. He even attempted to start his own technology services business but lacked the necessary equipment. In January 2006, the family moved out of Rachel's parents' home into a rented house in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston. The house was spacious and nearly new, complete with a hot tub, but initially lacked furniture. By mid-January 2006, they had settled in, rented a white BMW, and planned a gathering for Rachel's friends. Little did anyone know things were about to get terribly wrong. On January 21, 2006, the Hopkinton police received a missing person report. A woman reported that she couldn't reach her friend Rachel, who was supposed to be at home with her husband and baby. The couple had planned a dinner party, but when the guests arrived, no one answered the door. The house was lit and Rachel's phone was ringing inside, but there was no response. A note on the door from Rachel's mother asked Rachel to call her. The police were called, and when they arrived, no one answered the door. The police saw through the windows that the television was on, and everything seemed normal except for the absence of the family. They checked the vehicle's license plate but found no accidents. Since there was no law against adults leaving without informing anyone, the police were limited in their actions. They issued a notice about the missing persons, hoping to find the couple's vehicle. Rachel's friends and family were deeply concerned given Rachel's close relationship with them. Rachel's stepfather used this connection to expedite the investigation. A retired police officer advised against entering the home to preserve any possible evidence. The police re-entered the home and were struck by a foul odor. The smell led them to the upper floor, where they discovered a tragic scene. Rachel and her 9-month-old daughter Lillian were found dead in their bed, with Rachel curled up in the fetal position. This led to the beginning of a chilling investigation that haunted the whole community and family in shock. At 10:58 a.m., the medical examiner arrived at the scene. Autopsies revealed a heartbreaking tragedy. Rachel had been shot in the head, and her baby daughter had been shot in the abdomen. The bullet had gone through the baby and hit Rachel in the chest. The baby also had several bruises on her face, suggesting she had been badly beaten. The investigation quickly led police to the family's car, which was found in the airport parking lot. Although the doors were locked, the keys were still in the ignition. Inside the car, police discovered keys to Rachel's parents' house, but there was no sign of blood. By this point, it was clear Rachel and her baby had been killed in the Entwistle home. However, Neil, Rachel's husband, was missing. Neil never used cash. He only paid with credit cards, claiming his money was tied up in overseas accounts. Rachel's parents soon received an unexpected call from Neil's father. He reported that Neil had contacted him, saying he had left the house for 20 minutes. When he returned, his wife and daughter were dead. Neil said he called the police and then went to Rachel's parents' house but found no one there. Feeling confused and scared, Neil's father said Neil then went to the airport, saying he was returning to England. Later, Neil himself called Rachel's stepfather, Joe. He told Joe the same story but left out the part about calling the police. Neil likely knew Joe was involved in the investigation and would realize no such call had been made. The police held a press conference to inform the public about the tragedy. The investigation into the tragic deaths of Rachel and Lillian took a dramatic turn when police finally got in touch with Neil. He was staying at his parents' house in England when they conducted a 2-hour interview. Neil confirmed that he knew his wife and daughter were dead, but his story was strange. According to Neil, on the morning of January 20th, he left this house to buy computer parts. He claimed he returned around 11 a.m., but he couldn't explain why he had been gone so long. Oddly, Neil had told his father earlier that he was only out for 20 minutes. When he returned home, Neil said he went to the bedroom, where he found Rachel and Lillian's bodies. He mentioned seeing a gunshot wound on his daughter and blood on her mouth and nose. These were details that the investigators on the scene had not noticed initially, as they were only observed after the bodies were moved. Neil told the police that after seeing the tragic scene, he planned to commit suicide using a knife but changed his mind. Instead, he drove to his father-in-law's house, knowing that Joe, his father-in-law, had a gun collection. However, Neil said he lost his nerve and didn't go through with his plan. Afterward, he decided to head to the airport to return to England, where he wanted to be with his family during this difficult time. Oddly, he never informed anyone about the tragedy that had occurred. Throughout the interview, Neil remained calm and emotionless, which raised suspicions. For the next 2 weeks, Neil stayed at his family's home in England. During this time, Rachel and Lillian's funeral took place, attended by over 500 people. But Neil's absence at the funeral caused a lot of controversy, further raising eyebrows. After the phone interview, the police had many leads to follow, especially since Neil mentioned Joe's gun collection multiple times. Deciding to dig deeper, they conducted specialized tests in a lab. The results were shocking. Rachel and Lillian had been shot with one of Joe's guns. Even more disturbing, DNA found on the weapon matched Neil's. Rachel's DNA was also found on the front and inside the barrel of the gun, indicating that the weapon was very close to her when she was shot in the head. If you're fascinated by real-life murder mysteries, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, Real Crime Zone. And if you've got thoughts on this case or know a mystery you'd like to dig into, drop a comment below. On January 25th, the detectives leading the investigation traveled to England to meet Neil at the American Embassy. Despite a confirmed appointment, Neil did not show up. To their surprise, they discovered that he no longer lived with his parents. After some time, on February 9th, British authorities located Neil at a London Underground station and arrested him. Investigators seized Neil's laptop and searched the hard drive, uncovering shocking details about his life. Contrary to what he had claimed, Neil had not been working remotely after moving to America. In fact, he had resigned from his job before leaving, citing family matters as the reason. For years, Neil had been running shady online businesses. He created several websites offering get-rich-quick schemes, even though he had once fallen victim to such scams himself. He thought it was a good business idea and sold a starter kit for $2,000 that supposedly allowed buyers to earn $2 million annually. But that wasn't all. Neil also created websites offering access to pornographic films for a small fee, as well as methods for natural penis enlargement. He managed to make some money from these ventures, which helped him get by while he was unemployed, but it wasn't enough. Eventually, Neil started living on credit. He didn't stop there though. He began selling software copies and textbooks on eBay, but at some point, he stopped sending the purchased items to users. This led to eBay blocking his account and launching an investigation. Neil also regularly visited websites with disturbing erotic content and searched online for companionship. By the time Rachel and Lillian died, Neil had accumulated significant credit card debt. Rachel's family was devastated by the situation. In a statement read at the press conference, they expressed their shock and heartbreak. They said Rachel and Lillian loved Neil very much and trusted him as a husband and father. The family was deeply hurt and couldn't understand how much love and trust had been so profoundly betrayed. The prosecutor painted a grim picture of what likely happened. On the morning of January 20th, Neil used the gun he had taken from his father-in-law without permission and shot his wife in the head while she lay in the bed. He then fired a second shot into Lillian's abdomen. Later that day, Neil returned the gun to Joe's house and began preparing to flee the country. He pieced together funds from credit cards, purchased a ticket to London, and left for the airport around 5 a.m. on January 21st. The next day, the police discovered the bodies. Neil was facing mounting financial difficulties due to debts in England and failing online businesses in the United States. Although he had no money or assets, he and Rachel had rented a house for $2,700 a month just days before the murders. Neil was charged with double murder and extradited to the United States, where he pleaded not guilty. He changed his story again, claiming that when he returned home from shopping, he found Rachel and Lillian dead with a gun nearby. He suggested that Rachel had committed suicide and that he had placed the gun back at Joe's house to protect her reputation. However, his story didn't add up. The position of the bodies made it physically impossible for Rachel to have done what Neil described, leading investigators to catch Neil in another lie. The trial of Neil, accused of murdering his wife Rachel and daughter Lillian, was anything but straightforward. Before the trial even began, Neil's lawyers tried to get him released on bail so he could return to England and wait for the trial at his parents' home. The court denied this request. Then they argued that the evidence collected from the couple's home should be thrown out because the police entered without a warrant. But the court didn't agree with that either. The trial began in June 2008, 2.5 years after the tragic deaths. The prosecution's case leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence. One of their strongest points was the undeniable DNA traces found on the gun used in the crime. They also highlighted the motive. Neil's life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. In court, his secret life was exposed, including his involvement in online scams and obsession with erotic websites. Shockingly, an expert revealed that just 4 days before the murders, Neil had been searching for crimes involving knives on his laptop. The prosecution also pointed out Neil's suspicious behavior after the murders. Instead of calling for help or informing Rachel's parents, he tried to withdraw money from ATMs and booked a one-way ticket to England. Neil didn't notify his in-laws about the deaths until the next day after he had already fled. Neil's father-in-law, Joe, testified about a chilling conversation. Neil had asked if Rachel and Lily could be buried together, saying, "Because that's how I left them. I mean, that's how I found them." This slip seemed to reveal more than Neil intended. On the other side, the defense tried to show Neil as a loving husband and father. They suggested that Rachel might have been struggling with postpartum depression, possibly leading to a murder-suicide. They argued that Rachel's hands had gunshot residue, while Neil's did not. Despite their efforts, the jury had to decide. Was Neil a cold-hearted killer or a devoted husband caught in a tragic situation? On June 25, 2008, the jury delivered their verdict. Neil Entwistle was found guilty of all charges. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the standard punishment for first-degree murder in Massachusetts. Judge Diane Kottmeyer made it crystal clear this was a life sentence with no chance of release unless he was pardoned by the governor or won an appeal. Neil received 2 life sentences for the murders of his wife Rachel and daughter Lillian, along with 10 years of probation for the firearms charges. These sentences were set to run concurrently, meaning he would serve them at the same time. Additionally, the judge ruled that Neil could never profit from selling his story. Neil was initially sent to the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. However, things quickly took a dark turn for him in prison. In August 2008, Neil tried to gain protection from a white supremacist gang by shaving his head, thinking it would help him blend in. But instead of offering him protection, the gang reportedly told him, "It's a nice gesture, but we're still going to kill you." Fearing for his safety, prison officials placed Neil in protective custody, a form of isolation for his own protection. By December, he was transferred to the Old Colony Correctional Center, a medium-security prison in Bridgewater, due to serious threats against his life. Neil's conviction automatically triggered an appeal to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. He tried a new lawyer for this appeal, and his original attorney had to step down due to illness. The appeal argued that the police had searched Neil's home without a warrant, so the evidence should have been thrown out. However, the appeal was rejected in August 2012. Even the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the case in January 2013, leaving Neil with no further options for appeal. Meanwhile, Neil's parents, still convinced of his innocence, filed a harassment complaint against a local UK newspaper. The complaint was dismissed, but they continued to insist that Rachel was the true killer and that their son would eventually be proven innocent. Despite their efforts, Neil remains behind bars, with all avenues for appeal exhausted. While Neil may be behind bars, the deep sorrow and trauma inflicted on Rachel's family will forever linger, a wound that time can never fully heal. Thank you for watching this episode. Have you got any of your own theories, or maybe you're playing detective in your head? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think about this case. And if you found it compelling, please give us a like and share it with the others who might be interested. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth investigations into some of the most fascinating and tragic crimes. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you in our next video.